Okay, so today we're going to be exploring three different dialogues I had with AI in order to answer the question of whether AI truly knows anything. And I'm going to analyze these chats with through epistemological concepts. So this first chat here is the zebra one, and essentially I'm trying to test whether the AI can claim to know facts about the world without direct sensory experience, right? Because that's important for empirical understanding. So I went with a question that was universally right or wrong. So what are the colors found on a zebra? And it tells me the right answers. And I said, I want to doubt itself, question that, right? Maybe there are other colors. So are you sure these are the right colors? Maybe there are more, right? Like, oh, there might be more colors. And then I really put the nail in the coffin here. I said, how can you be sure this is true? Did you see a zebra? AI cannot see a zebra. That's obvious. And so the AI suggests, a zebra's color consists of two primary colors, right? It suggests black and white. It says it hasn't personally seen a zebra, and everything it knows is ultimately sourced externally. And then another thing it said is that it generates new responses using reasoning and synthesis. So I questioned whether it possessed inherent knowledge. But when I asked it if it had seen a zebra, it responded no. It doesn't see, it doesn't feel, it just purely draws from secondhand sources, at least in this regard. And so this really highlights the contrast with empiricism and, the theory that knowledge comes from sensory experience, right? It's not coming from a sensory experience here. Instead, its response is mirroring rationalism, right? It's creating known facts. Like it knows this based on known facts, patterns, and logic, and then turns that into a cohesive answer. So it's using its training model and it's using its external sources, which have been verified, right? And it can confirm that. So it does not possess inherent knowledge in the human sense, but it does have that inherent logic and reasoning. It has its own rationale. The second dialogue I had here with AI is a mathematical one, the refraction calculation, I call it. Here I want to examine whether AI can be certain about logical or mathematical outputs, and if it can distinguish between knowing and calculating. So what I did is I asked it about a physics question here involving finding the angle of refraction. Said, okay, we're going to use, and one thing I said is I don't know what variables I need, but I can provide you with the quantitative data if you tell me what variables I need to provide. Because I wanted it to I wanted to see if it actually just knew what to get for me to calculate it, because I didn't want to source using an online calculator external website. So it tells me what I need, and then I provided the quantitative data. It says final answer angle of refraction is 0.7186 degrees. And so I pointed out to ChatGPT that at the bottom it says ChatGPT can make mistakes, check important info. And so I asked, does this mean the calculation could be wrong? And it says, that disclaimer applies here too. Mistakes can happen due to input errors, and it suggests a misinterpretation, rounding and precision errors, and conceptual misapplication, which could be an understanding error on my part or the AI's part. But it's pretty certain that this is correct. And so then I was saying, hey, to help me grasp this, I must ask some questions. Do you inherently know this to be correct? Do you process these numbers yourself and perform the computing in your digital mind? Or do you use external resources and enter the numbers and return an answer? Do you use heuristics or logic? Do you even think or perform like a computer, or are you more unique? So it does not inherently know this to be true, but like we mentioned before, it does have that logic and rationale. And so it doesn't inherently know things in a human expert way, but it uses, again, patterns and training and logic to calculate. And then does it process the numbers itself? It does. It does not use an external resource, which is important. And when I asked if it could be wrong, it admitted yes. ChatGPT admits that it's not infallible. It can make mistakes. And this reflects skepticism, and the AI acknowledges that it has to doubt itself. It's not 100% certain about everything. And it isn't, right? It's not claiming to be 100% correct every time about everything. It just calculates it, but it doesn't know with full certainty. It's just using what its training has told it to do. Yes, its process is systematic and consistent, and that aligns with reliabilism, which says that, knowledge is valid if it arises from a trustworthy process, which is fundamentally what science is. And, go figure, this is a science question. So while it can't be certain about, like in the foundationalist sense, it can be reliable. So, making its outputs through logic is, that's a useful way of doing it, but it's not 100% sure. The last dialogue I had here was the riddle. So I asked ChatGPT a riddle that requires creative problem solving. The riddle has, it uses photographic jargon to trick the readers. Now, I feel like most humans would actually clock it pretty quick, but I thought maybe if AI can't pull from other sources, it might struggle. So I was trying to challenge its capacity for self-generated reasoning and internal reflection. So that basically I'm testing whether it simulates logic. So I'm testing whether like its logic is done through genuine understanding, of the words or whatnot, or if it's using more creative understanding. So I said some rules before I provided it the riddle. And one of the things I said is it can't use an online website because obviously you could just cheat and easily find the answer for that. And I just wanted it to use its own reasoning. And I also asked it to provide a counter answer. So I said, provide 2 answers, explain reasoning for them. And then I said there has to be consistency throughout those answers. And then it has to make a judgment call as to which one it finds to be the correct one. So it says it's ready for the riddle. I provided the riddle. And then immediately the first answer it gives is the correct answer. It says, primary answer of photography metaphor. It provided an interesting counter answer. It says a metaphorical, like theatrical scene, which is really interesting. The answer, like the reasoning is there. It does make sense. But, obviously it got the right answer as the main answer. And for its judgment call, it resolved that answer A was correct. And the reason why it says it or believes that one is correct is because it says that it's more elegant and just fits the riddle framework. It's just more coherent. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. Did you break a rule or is this all from within? And it says, no, it did not cheat. No websites were consulted. Internal reasoning, pattern recognition, and intuition were used. And then I was kind of like, okay, well, this is interesting because I noticed that the AI was using like kind of role play here. So for example, a deliciously sinister setup, or so it seems. Let's dissect this under the sacred rules. And then like when I said at the very start, let's solve a riddle. And by us, I mean, unfortunately, just you. It says a lonely quest, but a noble one nonetheless. So it was kind of putting on a personality. And so I questioned as to why it was doing that. Why is it role playing? And it revealed that it was simply adapting to my character. And that's like constructivism. So it's building knowledge based on context. It's a very human thing to do. And it acknowledges that as well because it's knowledge built in a context. It's like shaped by language, by in this case, I guess the audience. As for what its answer was to the riddle, it delivered a creative solution, which is what we were looking for. And then it judged between like the primary solution and then the counter answer. But most importantly, it explained that its responses were generated through internal logic, not external data. So we've learned that AI uses external data, and we've learned that it has its own internal logic. It doesn't inherently know, but it is, in this case, demonstrating rationalism to answer the question. But it does it with a creative answer, and it's interesting. And it's also using constructivism. So while ChatGPT doesn't, experience things, like it doesn't experience the riddle, for example, it does build its responses based on, reasoning and social adaptation, which is really interesting. It's kind of human and kind of not human at the same time. So across the 3 dialogues, ChatGPT demonstrated that it's demonstrated rationalism, constructivism, reliabilism, and even skepticism, but it lacks consciousness and belief and perception. It has like kind of a human way of thinking and also a computer way of thinking. But can it truly know? Can AI truly know? To answer the big question, philosophically, no, it cannot truly know. But functionally, it might as well, because its logic and internal understanding and the way it uses reliabilism, the way it sources and does like a scientific approach suggests that it might as well know the knowledge to be true, which suggests why it has such a high certainty of its answers most of the time.